provoke, why did your brother tell you to voluntarily go to prison?
I'm sorry?
Why did your brother tell you to voluntarily
Go to
go
prison.
to prison?
Well, the whole entire thing started with my brother. You know, as you just heard this chapter, he from since like I remember him. The first time I actually saw him, I was 5. I believe he was 10. And there is a chapter the first time I actually see him, because after my father died, I was 2 years old, and then my mom sent me to live with my grandmother in a different city, Shiraz. And then I didn't see any of my brothers, with the exception of my oldest brother Ali. And then my mom would come and go, and I always thought my mom was a fruit lady, you know, because she would come with basket of fruits and all that. And then suddenly, and then my 3 of my brothers were in the boarding school, Muhammad included, and he would run away from the boarding school, and he would come in the middle of the night. So this was my first encounter with my brother. And then since I remember him, he loved books. He was so curious. He had such passion and such a sense of justice for everyone. He was so sensitive to the poor and everything. So when I grew up with him, like looking at him like I don't know, like an idol. He was my idol, and everything that he would do, I would just like, you know, always like support him. I was the one in the family who always like, you know, whatever he did, I said, that's correct, that's good, you know, hey, go for it. So when he got involved with the oppositions groups after revolution, of course, a year and a half later, all the opposition groups were banned, and their activities were considered, you know, terrorist movements. So they were all, you know, either had to be arrested or get executed. And my brother, of course, got arrested. And then I could not just sit down and not do anything. So I would practically, you know, just go and then give flyers, you know, like, or just like put flyers under the houses of people, or try to say something against the injustice that it was going on, against the executions, the mass murders, you know, against like, you know, the imprisonments and all that. And of course, my name was mentioned. I was in high school then myself, and my name was mentioned. And the Sepah, the Revolutionary Guard, came after me, which is also, there is a chapter. There is like 80 pages of chapter in that particular book. So they came after me, but I ran away that night. I escaped. And they were, like, I was in hiding for 8 months, and they came several times to find me, and practically they couldn't. And my brother had, well, first, when he was arrested, they gave him life in prison. And his verdict changed from life in prison to executions. So every Wednesday, we knew that that might be the last Wednesday that, you know, we would actually have him, because everyone was practically getting executed at that time. And my brother was not an exception. So he was so fearful for me, because I wasn't really much involved in political parties, and he knew whatever I've done, it was because of my emotional, you know, support for him, and because of my bond for him. And he knew sooner or later they would come and get me. And every week when my mom was going to prison to visit my brother, they would tell my mom that we know that you're harboring your daughter somewhere, and if you are not turning her in, one of these days we would just like, you know, take you. And they actually took my mom once, and they took my other brother like for a month or so. So he just thought, like, you know, his life is already ruined, you know, he is going to be executed, and there is just nothing that he could change. But he thought if I would just like practically come in, you know, turn myself in, they would practically just, you know, like let me go. And they promised him, they told him, you know, the Revolutionary Guard told him, if she would come in, we would just have like just the questions or whatever, just one afternoon, and then we would release her. And he thought, like, you know, let me just help my sister in that way, that, you know, she would move on with her life rather than living in hiding. And so that's the reason. And I actually turn myself in. And I thought, like, you know, it would actually help him too. Like, you know, they would reverse his verdict to life in prison rather than executing him. But it didn't really help much. And I actually ended up staying there 1 year myself. So I hope that was the answer of your question. Yes. Any other questions? Yes.
How were you then able to get out of it?
Well, you mean me? They gave me a 2-year verdict, practically. That afternoon turned into 1 year, one entire year. And because the amount of executions were so high, and then they were like, from my own family, my brother included, 6 of my other cousins were executed too during that period of time. Nasser, for instance, the cousin that I mentioned, just the 2 of them got executed. So they have done so much to my family that I think that, maybe they had mercy on my mother and my, my relatives, my other relatives, that they had children killed. So my 2-year, there was an amnesty for the New Year, Persian New Year. And in that amnesty, they chose people that they thought that they were harmless, that they had just a verdict of 1 year to 5 years or something. So my 2 years actually decreased to 1 year, and then they let me go after that 1 year. But then for the entire period of 1 year, I was not allowed to leave the city, and every month I had to actually go in to the, to just introduce myself to the Sepah, to the guard, Revolutionary Guard, and sign in that I am here. And then they would, ask questions like, okay, who did you see? Who did you talk to? Did you talk to any of the opposition's groups members? Or, it was hell. It was practically not really living free, because you were always under the watchful eyes of the Hezbollah and the Sepah Revolutionary Guard. Any other questions? Yes.
So to get out of Iran, when you came here,
Yes.
how did you get a passport? And they should have, did they link
That's
you
a
with
very
the
good
visa?
question. At the time, actually, we were not, like, young. I was not even allowed to leave the country to begin with, and younger people specifically were not allowed to even, get a passport. But because so many people, millions of Iranian at the time, they were also leaving the country and exiling, and they were dealers that they were like suddenly surfacing like any other, I guess, after revolution, situation. And if you would give them enough money, they would, like, they would have these contacts. Either they would give you a fake passport, or they would find someone in the passport office to issue a passport. And this is like 22 years ago, and the Revolutionary Guard was not computerized yet, so they did not have really access to everything to find out the exact information. So we actually paid someone a big amount of money who led us to go to the passport office and get the passport. And the only place that I could go, it was Turkey, because at the time, or I guess even now, it did not require any visas for the Iranian nationality. You could just, like, travel, get on the plane. So I actually thought about the whole entire thing. My mom would not even leave me, let me leave. So I told her that we're going to go for a 1 week, just like visit, Turkey, just to get away from all these pains and sufferings and whatever. And then once we arrived in Mehrabad airport in Tehran, I told her, I'm sorry, Mom, you're going back home, but I'm going to Turkey, and from Turkey, I would try to see any of the countries who would take me as asylum. I would start with Germany, because Germany was at the time like accepting big, huge exodus of Iranian, nationality. So once I was in Turkey, I guess I stayed there 10 days. This would be also like in my second book, following this. So I stayed there 10 days, and then again I paid somebody else, one of the smugglers, and they got me a visa for East Berlin. That was then, it was East Germany, West Germany. And then I came to Germany and I took asylum, and I lived in Germany for 4 years actually before I came to the US.